We're going to talk about small things today, because the fact is, it's often the small things that get you. Have you ever noticed that in life? Small things are very important. In fact, Jesus said that it is the small things that are really the key to even greater things in the world to come. Listen to how he put this in Matthew chapter 25, verse 21. Jesus said to his faithful people, because you've been loyal with the small things, I will let you take care of much greater things. Come and share my joy with me. You see, all the great leaders have always known the importance of the small things. That is, the small problems, the small irritations, and the small difficulties. They're part of every one of our lives and every part of our lives. It's not often the big things that get you. It's the small things that trip you up. Nicholas Camphert once said, "In great affairs, men show themselves as they wish to be seen. In the small things, they show themselves as they really are." You see, the way you handle small things is very, very important. You can take a grain of sand, and if it's in your shoe, it's as annoying as all get out. It can really mess things up. But you take that same grain of sand and you put it in an oyster, and that oyster can turn it into the most beautiful pearl imaginable. The same grain of sand, don't you see? It's how you handle it that really makes the difference. It's what you do with it that really changes the ball game. If you've been going through life and you want to be a leader, well, know for certain that leaders make a difference in this world. And if we're going to make a difference in this world in which we live, much of it depends on how we respond to the small things in our life, to the small irritations, to what seems minuscule in our lives. How you handle that really is going to determine how much of a leader you really are. One of the greatest leaders who ever lived, of course, was a man named Moses. We know about him in the Bible. He was a guy that did incredible amounts of things in his life. His story includes the parting of the Red Sea, which God did. His story includes leading more than 1 million Israelites through the Red Sea on dry ground. It also includes the 10 plagues that were unleashed against the nation of Egypt that brought it to its knees. And of course, Moses was the one who received the 10 commandments from God. You know, Moses was one of the greatest leaders in this world. But I want to tell you, the biggest challenge he had in his life was not the big things. Really, it was the small things. It was the constant drip, drip, drip of the fact that the Israelites grumbled and complained each and every step they took through that desert wandering. See, all the big miracles that happened in Egypt kept the people of Israel alive and saved them. But it was the small things that they just couldn't get past. They kept grumbling and complaining. Moses, we're tired of drinking out of these canteens. When are we going to come to some fresh, cool water? Moses, our diet is too mundane. It's manna, manna, manna. When are we going to get some Taco Bell up in here? You know what I mean? They grumbled. They complained. They said to Moses, "Moses, are we there yet? Moses, are we there yet? For 40 years, are we there yet?" Now, if you got little kids and you've ever taken a road trip, you know how insane they can drive you. I mean, just 5 miles from the house, they're going, "Are we there yet?" And we're going to Florida. Go to sleep. Well, can you imagine poor old Moses? Moses had more than 1 million kids in his back seat. And he drove around for a lot farther than a trip to Florida, I guarantee you that. You see, it's the small things that really became the greatest struggle in Moses' life. For Moses, it was the people of Israel constantly grumbling and complaining. Let me ask you, how about you? What is the most serious irritation that you have to face? Is it obstinate coworkers? Coworkers who let you do all the work while they spend their time on Facebook? Is it that commute that you have to endure from here to Nashville? Who's kidding who? Just getting down Warfield. It is quite a challenge between 3 and 5 o'clock. Let me tell you, that's enough to drive you crazy. What is it for you? Is it the phones or your unsmart phone that you have? Is it the whacked out computers you have to use at work? Is it the printer that can never seem to print out documents whenever you hit the print button? Is it all those transistorized tormentors in your life? You see, there's lots of small things that can become big irritations in our life. And if we're not careful, they can start to ruin us inside and out. So this morning, I want to look at God's plan on how to deal with the small irritations that come our way. Moses had to learn how to deal with these small irritations in his life. And as we'll see in a couple of weeks, when we return to Moses once again, we'll see that there was one small thing that really became Moses' downfall. It wasn't a big thing, it was a small thing. But by and large, Moses handled the small things reasonably well. And I want to look at 3 secrets to handling the small difficulties in life based on the life of Moses. If you want to take your outlines of this morning's message out, you can follow along with us as we look at the first decision that we need to make in dealing with the small difficulties of life. And that is decide that nothing is too small for prayer. You see this pattern in Moses' life, that he prayed about the big things, but he also prayed about the small things as well. You see this beginning in Exodus, the 15th chapter, all the way through Deuteronomy to the end of Moses' life. The people would come and they would grumble to him about their lack of fresh water. And so Moses would pray to God about the lack of fresh water, and he would pray to God about the grumbling the people were doing. The people would come and they would grumble and complain about the food. And then he would go to God and he would pray to God about the mundane diet. And he would pray to God about how he was feeling, with all these people dumping on him about the food supply. See, here's the amazing thing about Moses. Sure, he prayed about the Red Sea incident. He had the largest army on the face of the earth at that time, riding right down on top of him. So, of course, he prayed over that issue. But, he prayed about the small things, too. And that was a pattern of this man's life. And this is one of the keys to why he became the greatest leader of all times. A lot of us, I think, are willing in our life to pray about the big things that we face. But sometimes we're guilty of having this conviction that, hey, it's just a small thing. I don't want to bother God about the small things in my life. So I'm not going to bother him by praying about the small things. Well, because of that, is it any wonder that it's the small things that trip us up so often? Is it any wonder that it's the small things that can really do a person in? Let me challenge you just to think about God as he exists. We have a leadership training class for all the guys that want to become a deacon in the church. They have to read through the Bible from cover to cover. And they have to read a doctrinal book, a book on Christian doctrine, systematic theology that we read together. And we're going to meet actually this Saturday. We spent a couple hours talking about it. And this reading period was talking about the attributes of God, which is kind of a mind-expanding thing, let me tell you. But one of the attributes of God is he is infinite. In all his attributes, he is infinite. And folks, this is one of the problems that I think a lot of people have with respect to their personal prayer life. They think, oh my goodness, I just don't want to pray about the trivial things. God doesn't have time. God doesn't have time to deal with my trivial things or the small things in my life. But that's the wrong way to look at God. God is infinite. And because he is infinite, he has eternity. to contemplate you, to listen to your prayers, that's no hindrance for an infinite God. And that's the truth about God. You see, He is infinite. When you come to God in the small things and in prayer, what you're really doing is saying, God, I trust you. Even in the small, mundane things of my life, I look to you for your help. I look to you for your deliverance, even in these things as well. I need to depend on God because there's not only big things in my life, but I want to tell you there's a lot of small things that pop up from day to day. And I need to be actively praying about those too, not just the big things. Now, of course, you don't want to get goofy about this. You don't want to be stupid. You don't come to a stoplight and say, God, should I turn left or right? You know what I mean? I don't think that's it. I don't think you need to go through the drive-thru and think, God, should I supersize or not supersize? That is the question I'm facing right now. Well, you're right. Okay, maybe I do need to pray about it. Thanks, honey. Anyway, okay, pray about those things too. But I think with respect to finances, I think most of us, who are Christians, who really believe in God, I think we have no problem with the concept of praying to God when we're going to do something like purchase a house. I mean, that's a big investment. And when you're sitting there in the lawyer's office, filling out all the papers, and you're signing 30 pieces of paper with your name on it, I think that is something that I think most Christians would say, I'm going to pray about, because they're asking for my firstborn if I don't repay the loan. So I think that is something most of us. And I'll tell you, most Christians, I don't think would have a problem with the concept of praying for like a car. Because when you're making a car, that's a big investment, and it's going to tie up your finances for several years. I think most Christians would kind of have the concept of praying even for a car. But what about lesser expenditures that you make? I think when you're sitting there thinking about buying a TV, it would be an appropriate time to pray, God, do I really need this TV? Is this a wise use of my funds? Or am I wanting this 75-inch TV to impress my family and friends that come over so they can go home and tell all their friends, listen, that living room has 3 walls and a TV? Yeah, I would say you need to be praying about that TV if it costs more than your house and your car. I would say, yes, you need to pray about that. But even if it doesn't, don't you see, I think that's one of those things that you ought to pray about. Lord, is this expenditure something that I really need to be doing? You see, prayer on those kind of issues is really the key to keeping yourself on track in the big things and the small things as well. So pray even about the small things. And the second decision is expect disappointment. If you make it through the irritations of life, if you want to make it through the little disappointments in life, then I think one of the keys to that is expecting disappointments to come. Listen, we all have this dream of a perfect day, but in truth, none of us have had a perfect day in this world. We've had good days. We've had better days than others, but in truth, there is no such thing as a perfect day in this world. Like Mark was talking about, the days when Adam and Eve walked the face of the earth, there were perfect days. But since the fall, this world is under a curse. There are no perfect days in this world anymore, but that is what heaven is all about. Heaven, don't you see, is that place where the days will be perfect. Heaven is the place, the Bible says, where there'll be no more tears, no more mourning, no more crying, no more pain. They will be perfect days there, not here. So that means that disappointments are inherent in this day and in this age. Small disappointments, difficulties, frustrations are part of what it means to live in the here of now. Can you imagine with me how disappointed the people of Israel were and the disappointment they felt time and time again through the desert wanderings. In Exodus, the 15th chapter, it said they had been wandering in the desert for 3 days. And as they were wandering, they were drinking from their canteens, from the carried water that they had with them. And that water, of course, in the desert was getting warm, lukewarm at best, and it was starting to run low. So after 3 days, they finally ran into a spring of water. They ran into a pool of water, and as the Israelites kind of jumped upon this pool of water, this is what Exodus 15:23 says. It says, "But the people couldn't drink it because it was bitter. They named the place Marah, which means bitter." Here they finally found fresh water, and when they landed upon it, when they sucked it into their mouth, they spit it out instantly because it was bitter. It had a foul taste. And then they started to grumble. And then they started to complain. They complained and said, "How could this happen to us? Why on earth would God have done this to us? Here we are in the desert, and we finally come upon some water, and it's bitter water." Let me tell you, oftentimes, people get stuck in their disappointments. People's lives begin to be defined by the disappointments that come their way. But Moses prayed. While the people grumbled, Moses prayed. And God said to Moses, "Moses, I've got a plan. I want you to see that stick over there. Do you see the stick over there, Moses? Pick up that stick and throw it in the water. And as soon as that stick hits the surface of that water will become sweet. It would no longer be bitter." So Moses gets the stick and he throws it in the water, and sure enough, takes a drink, and it is sweet water. Now, that was a pretty simple plan, if you have to admit. You see, Moses saw God's plan because he didn't get stuck in the disappointments. Because his first reaction was not to grumble, but to pray. I think there are so many times in every one of our lives that we get stuck in our disappointment. And we get stuck there and we miss the wonderful thing that God is really trying to do in that situation to bring glory to himself. We've been genuinely disappointed in our life. And because of the disappointments we've had, we're over in the corner sulking. And God's out there wanting to do something great in our lives. He's wanting to show something great to us of himself. And we're going, "No, I've been disappointed so often in the past. I'm only going to be disappointed again." So we miss the great things that God wants to do for us. And Moses didn't miss it. Moses didn't miss it. Everybody else did. And because Moses didn't miss it, you know what? The people ended up getting it also. Isn't that what it means to be a leader? To trust in God? You see, sometimes our disappointments cause us to miss God's incredible appointments for his blessing in our lives. Because the question isn't whether we're going to be disappointed in this world or not. That has never been the question. The question really is, what are we going to do when we face the disappointments in our lives? And actually, there's only 3 choices. First, I can be surprised by it. I can say, "Lord, why has this happened to me? Why am I getting a bum deal once again?" And when you react like that, bitterness is the emotion that comes up and fills your heart and fills your world. Well, guess what? Here's a news flash for you. We all face disappointments. We need to anticipate the fact that we will be disappointed. We need to be surprised when we don't face disappointments in life. The second thing we can do is we can resign to it. We can say, "Well, this is just the way the world is. It's a messed up place. It probably was messed up from the beginning." And what results there? Cynicism. We become cynical about our relationship with God. We become cynical about the church. We become cynical about the people in our world and our family members as well. Cynicism is also one of the choices you can make. But you know, when Moses was faced with disappointments, he did the third thing. That is, you can be faithful through it. You can look to God and turn to Him in prayer with confidence that He has the power to get you through whatever it is that the disappointments are bringing you down. You see, beyond bitterness, beyond cynicism, there is also God's peace that's waiting and available to those who turn and look for it. So, when facing the small things, first we need to realize that there is no small thing so small that it can't be prayed about. And second, we need to learn to expect disappointments, because that's what life is here down below. We're not in the promised land yet. We're in the land where disappointments abound. And third, you remember the big things. See, that is one of the lessons that Moses never allowed the children of Israel to forget. He said, do not forget the big things. Moses said in Deuteronomy 5:15, he said, remember that you were once slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out with amazing power and mighty deeds. Moses said to the people, never forget that you were slaves, but now you're free. When they complained, Moses, this water is stale. Our canteens are getting low. He said, yes, that's true. But remember, once you were slaves, but now you're free. When the children of Israel complained about the food, Moses said, yes, it's manna again for dinner tonight. But remember, once you were slaves, but now you're free. When they said yes, when they said the journey is getting too long, Moses said, yes, the journey is longer than any of us anticipated. But never forget that you were once slaves, but now you're free. Don't forget that. I think God wants to say the same thing into your life, into mine as well. He is a big God who wants to do big things through you and through your very life. Isn't that what Moses said? Deuteronomy 7:21. He said of God that He is a great and awesome God. And He wanted the people of Israel to never forget that God had done some incredible things for them. Now, if you're here this morning and you're going, well, of course, He led them through the sea on dry land. Of course, He delivered them with a mighty hand in the plagues. Of course, He appeared to the children of Israel on Mount Sinai. Of course, they remembered a lot of big things, but what about us? We don't have the Red Sea to remember. We were there around Mount Sinai when the angels of God descended on it. We weren't there when manna fell from the sky. We didn't see that. That's true. But we do have Jesus Christ, who came from on high, who lived the life as an example for you and me, who gave His life not for anything that He had ever done wrong, but for everything we had done wrong. He was raised from the dead, and He is seated at the right hand of the Mighty One in heaven. He has demonstrated His love for us with His own lifeblood, and has showed us that there is life beyond the grave itself. Never forget, those are the biggest things that have ever taken place on the face of this planet. By His resurrection, He has shown us the first illustration of the new heavens and the new earth. One who died and rose, never to die again. There has never been anyone on this planet who has risen never to die again, save the Lord Jesus Christ Himself. And it will repeat itself when he returns and calls his people from the grave. What love, what grace, what incredible mercy. Never forget the big things. Paul said this to the Christians in Ephesus. Paul said in Ephesians 3:18 and 19, he said, may you have the power to understand, as all God's people should. As all God's people should. How wide, how long, and how deep his love is. May you experience the love of Christ, though it is so great you'll never fully understand it. Don't you hear? Paul was saying the same thing Moses was. Don't forget the biggest thing. Not long ago, we had two sisters, Charlotte and Kimberly Vecchio, who came forward and wanted to be baptized in order to start their relationship with Christ. Today, we have Charlotte with us, but we don't have Kimberly with us anymore. I don't know if you were there that Sunday or if you remember, but Kimberly was in bad health. She had wrestled with multiple health problems, and because of that, she had to come forward with a walker. And I remember after we took her confession, remember how Chet and some of the other deacons came and helped her up the steps and helped her into the baptistry. You know, Kimberly had multiple health problems. She had some big problems health-wise, but she had some small health problems that were an annoyance day in and day out. And when you think about Kimberly, she had three options too, didn't she? She could have easily been surprised by these health problems that had befallen her. She could have complained and said, why me, Lord? I don't deserve this. Why not somebody else? Why me? She could have been bitter. You know, she could also have been cynical. That why do I need the church? Why do I need that? I mean, I'm suffering here. She could have been cynical. But you know what she chose? She chose the third option. She chose instead to put her faith and trust in Jesus Christ. She chose to think of the big thing, that he suffered and that he died for her. And that he was preparing a better place for her, where there is no more pain or sorrow or death or disease. She remembered the love of Jesus Christ. And in faith, she said, that's what I want. And we helped her up here. And we baptized her into Christ. And not long after that, she left this world. And I want to tell you, she's not disappointed today. The cool thing is, she's not suffering small things or big things today. That's all been taken care of. That's all been taken care of. And I talked last week about leadership. And I talked about young people. I talked about how the millennials, 2/3 of them, are taking off from the church, considered it unnecessary. And listen, I want to tell you kids that you can be leaders in your generation. You can stand up and say, no, Jesus Christ really was who he claimed he was. There is hope, and he is the hope of mankind. And as for me, I'm going to go accept Jesus, and I'm going to serve him through his church. But the cool thing is, today we're going to end we're going to end the service with Miss Shirley Vecchio, who's going to come up here now and is going to be baptized into Christ. Come on up, Shirley. And Shirley is Charlotte and Kimberly.